The last patch square of the net held through yesterday's haul. Whether it holds through today is another question. Salt air, the creak of old rope, gulls circling before the sun clears the breakwater. The harbour is already stirring around you. Welcome to History of Ordinary People. Here we leave behind the famous names and step into the lives of the people who built the world around them, live the lives history forgot. The water outside is flat and glassy, the kind of stillness that looks peaceful but rarely brings a good catch. Somewhere along your net, a patch you tied and retied 3 times waits to be tested again. Whether it survives today's work is not something you can know yet. You only know that the boat needs to go out, patch or no patch, calm water or not. You're awake before the sky has any colour in it. The straw mat beneath you is thin, worn down by years of the same weight settling into the same shape each night. Your wife stirs beside you but does not rise yet. Somewhere in the room your son's breathing is slow and even. You lie still for a moment longer, feeling the ache that has settled into your shoulders from yesterday's rowing, then push yourself up onto your elbows. The house is small, 2 rooms built close to the waterfront, walls thin enough that you can already hear the harbour waking outside. A cartwheel groans somewhere down the lane. A dog barks once and falls quiet. You swing your legs off the mat and your feet find the cool, packed earth of the floor. There is bread from yesterday sitting wrapped in cloth on the shelf, hard at the crust now, but still good enough to tear apart and chew while you dress. You eat standing, because sitting feels like an invitation to fall back asleep. The bread is plain, a little stale, baked 2 streets over by a man whose ovens you can smell some mornings when the wind turns. You do not think about him as you eat. You think about the water, and whether it will give you anything today. You pull your tunic over your head, the wool rough and familiar against skin that has spent a lifetime salted and sun-darkened. The hem is stiff in places where seawater has dried into it 100 times over. You do not bother with sandals yet. There will be time for that later, once your feet are done with mud and stone and the cold slap of shallow water. Outside, the lane is dark but not empty. Other men move along it in the same direction you do, some nodding, most silent, all carrying the same unhurried urgency of people who have done this every morning of their working lives. Somewhere ahead, a woman's voice calls out to a child to hurry, and a basket clatters against a doorframe. The harbour smell reaches you before the harbour itself does. Salt. Tar. The particular sourness of fish scales ground into old wood. Your partner is already waiting near the boat when you arrive, crouched over the hull, checking the ropes by feel more than by sight. He glances up as you approach and tilts his head toward the water without needing to say anything. The sea is what it is this morning, calm, uncertain. You will find out together what it intends to give you. Before anything else, you crouch beside the net, running your fingers along the mended section, feeling for the tightness of the knots, the give of old fibre against new twine. It held on the walk down from your mind. Now your hands need to confirm it. The morning air is cool enough to raise the hair on your arms, and somewhere behind you the first hint of grey light is creeping along the rooftops of the warehouse district, though the sun itself is still well below the horizon. Your partner hands you an oar without a word, and you take it the way you have taken it 1,000 mornings before, the wood smooth and familiar in your palm, worn down at the grip by years of hands exactly like yours. The boat rocks gently as you step in, one foot finding the hull before the other follows, your weight settling into the same practiced balance you learned before you can remember learning it. Around you, the harbour is coming fully awake now. A dock worker shouts something about a delayed shipment further down the waterfront, his voice carrying flat across the still water. Somewhere a rope slaps against a mast. The gulls that circled lazily a few minutes ago are gathering now, sensing the boats preparing to leave, already anticipating scraps that have not yet been caught. You push off from the mooring with a practiced shove, the boat sliding free of the dock and out into open water, the last lights of the harbour shrinking slowly behind you as the oars begin their steady rhythm, carrying you toward whatever the sea has decided to offer today. The oars settle into their rhythm, dipping and pulling in a motion your arms know better than your mind does. Your partner rows at the bow, matching your pace without needing to speak, the two of you falling into the same cadence you have shared for years. The harbour mouth widens ahead, the breakwater stones dark and slick, gulls perched along the top of them watching the boats pass beneath. Past the breakwater, the water changes. It is not rougher, not yet, but it feels larger, less contained, the swell lifting the hull gently beneath you in a way the harbour water never does. You glance toward the horizon out of habit, checking the colour of the sky where it meets the sea, the shape of the clouds low along the edges. Nothing troubling there, just stillness, the same flat calm that greeted you when you first stepped outside. Your partner slows his rowing, and you feel the boat drift into the gentle rhythm of open water, no longer cutting forward, but simply riding the swell. This is the spot close enough to the coastal shallows where the fish gather to feed, but far enough out that the nets will not tangle on rock or weed below. You have fished this stretch of water more mornings than you could count, and your body recognizes it the way it recognizes your own doorway. You lift the net from where it lies coiled at your feet, feeling once more for the mended patch, testing the knot with your thumb before you commit it to the water. Satisfied, you begin to feed the net out over the side, the stone weights pulling it down in a steady unspooling motion, while the cork floats bob along the surface, marking its shape beneath the water. Your partner works the other end, the two of you moving without conversation, each knowing exactly where the other's hands will be. The net disappears beneath the surface, and for a moment there is nothing to do but wait. You settle back against the hull, the wood cool through your tunic, and let your eyes drift over the water. A pair of gulls circle low, then bank away toward another boat further out. You watch their flight out of habit more than curiosity. Birds diving mean fish near the surface. Birds circling without diving mean nothing yet. The stillness of the water works at your patience the way it always does on mornings like this. Fish are cautious in calm water, more likely to sense the net before they swim into it, more likely to scatter at the shadow of the boat overhead. You do not say this aloud. You do not need to. Your partner is watching the same water with the same thought behind his eyes. To pass the waiting, you check the coiled rope at your feet, running it through your palm to find any place where salt and sun have begun to fray the fibre. There is a rough patch near the end. Not dangerous yet, but worth noting. You will replace it before it becomes a problem rather than after. This is not caution born of fear. It is simply the difference between a man who has fished for 30 years and one who has fished for 3. Somewhere off to your left, another boat is already hauling in, the shapes of 2 men leaning over the side, pulling steadily. You cannot tell from this distance whether their net is heavy or light, whether the morning is treating them kindly or not, but the sight of them working is enough to settle something in your own chest. The harbour is full of men doing exactly what you're doing, all of them hoping for the same ordinary thing. The sun edges higher now, catching the water in a pale gold light that makes the stillness almost beautiful, though you have long since stopped noticing beauty in it the way a stranger might. To you it is simply the shape of the morning, the same water you have known since you were a boy standing on the dock watching your own father do this same work. You test the net line once more, feeling for the particular tug that means something has swum into the mesh, and for a moment there is nothing. Only the gentle pull of the current and the quiet, patient work of waiting for the sea to decide what it will give you today. The tug comes without warning, a small resistance against your palm where the line rests, and you go still. Your partner feels it too, his head turning slightly toward the water where the cork floats have begun to dip and bob in a pattern too irregular to be current alone. Something has found the net. You wait a moment longer before pulling, letting whatever has swum in settle deeper into the mesh rather than risk it wriggling free at the first sign of movement. This is not something anyone taught you in words. It is something your hands learned long before your mind could have explained it. When the moment feels right, you nod once to your partner, and together you begin to draw the net back toward the boat. It comes up heavier than the stillness of the morning promised. Mullet mostly, silver bodies flashing as they twist against the mesh, along with a scattering of smaller fish you will sort through once the net is fully aboard. Not a great catch, not the kind men boast about in the harbour afterward, but steady, and steady is what feeds a family more reliably than luck ever does. You work the net over the gunwale together, the weight of it straining your shoulders in the familiar way, water sheeting off the mesh and pooling in the bottom of the boat. Once it is aboard, you begin the slower work of freeing each fish, tossing the sea bream and mullet into the woven basket at your feet, while your partner picks loose the tangled strands of seaweed that always seem to find their way into the net alongside the catch. Your fingers find the mended patch again in the middle of this work, and you pause just long enough to check it. Held. The knot is a little looser than you would like, but it survived the pull of a full net, which tells you more than words could. You make a mental note to retie it properly tonight rather than trust it to another morning. Among the mullet, a small flatfish has slipped through a gap near the edge of the mesh, and you catch it before it can flop free over the side. Your partner laughs under his breath, more out of habit than real amusement, and says something about the fish being smarter than the net gives it credit for. You do not answer, only toss it into the basket with the rest, already thinking ahead to the next cast. The sun has climbed higher now, warm against the back of your neck, and the stillness of the water has begun to shift into a light chop that makes the boat rock more insistently beneath you. This is when the fish grow more active, when the calm of dawn gives way to the ordinary business of the sea. You feed the net back over the side, weights and floats disappearing once more beneath the surface, and settle back to wait again. While you wait, you eat. Bread again, the same hard crust from this morning, softened now by the damp salt air, and a handful of olives your wife packed into a small cloth pouch before you left. Your partner eats his own share in silence, the two of you facing the open water rather than each other, eyes still drifting toward the horizon, out of habit even during rest. Watered wine passes between you in a clay cup, cool and faintly sour, cutting through the salt taste that has settled into your mouth. Further along the coast, another boat drifts closer than the others, and you recognize the figure at its bow well enough to lift a hand in greeting. He calls something across the water about the stillness of the morning, and you answer with a shrug that says more than words could. Neither of you needs to explain what the other already knows. Out past his boat, larger merchant vessels sit anchored in deeper water, waiting their turn toward the harbour mouth, their hulls riding low with cargo that has travelled farther than either of you ever will. The net tugs again before your meal is finished, and you set the bread aside without hesitation, already reaching for the line. This second haul comes up lighter than the first, but full enough that you exchange a glance with your partner and know without discussion that the decision has been made. 2 good pulls in still water is more than the morning promised. There is little sense chasing a third when the sun is climbing and the fish are growing wary of the light. You begin coiling the net rather than casting it again. Sorting takes longer than the catching did. You crouch over the basket, separating mullet from sea bream, setting the larger fish toward one side where buyers will pay properly for them, and pushing the smaller, bruised or torn specimens into a separate pile. A few anchovies caught in the mesh go into their own small basket, destined less for the table than for the salting vats near the fish market, where poorer cuts and remains are pressed into garum over the following weeks. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest fish has a buyer somewhere along the waterfront. Your partner takes the oars for the return, and you sit with the baskets braced between your knees, watching the harbour grow larger and more detailed as you approach. Merchant ships crowd the deeper water near the main quay, their hulls sitting low, waiting for porters to begin the slow work of unloading amphorae and grain sacks stacked along their decks. Dock labourers call to one another across the noise, coordinating the movement of cargo that will feed the city long after your own catch has been eaten and forgotten. The boat slides into its mooring with the same practised ease it left by, though the harbour around you is far busier now than it was at dawn. Fish sellers have already set up along the waterfront, their tables slick with scales from earlier boats, and buyers move between them with the unhurried confidence of men who know exactly what they are looking for. You lift the baskets onto the dock and begin the short walk toward your usual spot, nodding to a warehouse worker hauling rope past you without breaking stride. A woman you recognise, cook for one of the waterfront inns, is already waiting near your usual selling spot, eyeing the mullet with the practised glance of someone who has bought fish from you for years. She asks the price without much preamble, and you name a figure close to yesterday's, adjusting slightly for the size of the catch. She counters, not seriously, more out of habit than genuine disagreement, and you settle somewhere between the two numbers within a few exchanges. The stew at her inn tonight will carry a little of this morning's water in it. The smaller fish and the bruised mullet go quickly to a second buyer, a man who deals mostly in salted preparations, paying less per fish but taking the whole lot without argument. The anchovies and remains go to a boy sent down from one of the garum works further along the coast, who counts them into his own basket with practised efficiency and hands over a small sum without needing instruction. None of this requires much conversation. These are transactions worn smooth by repetition. The same buyers, the same rough prices, the same nods of agreement that need no further words. Before returning to the boat, you pause at the harbour official's post to pay the small mooring due owed for the season, a routine cost of keeping your place along this stretch of the waterfront. The exchange takes only a moment, coin passed and a mark made against your name, and then you are moving again, back toward the boat that still needs attention before the day can properly end. Cleaning comes next. You rinse the hull with buckets of harbour water, sweeping loose scales and stray seaweed over the side, while your partner spreads the net out along the dock to dry in the strengthening sun. Salt has worked its way deep into the fibres over the course of the morning, stiffening sections that will need soaking before they soften again. This is unglamorous work, the kind no one notices, but skipped work today becomes a torn net tomorrow. It is while running the net through your hands, checking each section as it dries, that you find it. Not the mended patch from this morning, which held exactly as it should, but a new weak point further along, where the twine has begun to fray against a stone weight that has rubbed the same spot too many times. Small now, manageable. But it will need proper attention before tomorrow's cast, another quiet task added to the afternoon's list. The kind of small, ordinary problem that never truly ends for a man who lives by his nets. The afternoon settles into the slower rhythm of repair work. You sit near the boat with the frayed section of net stretched across your knees, working a bone needle through the twine, replacing what the stone weight has worn thin. Your partner works beside you on a length of rope, splicing where salt and use have begun to fray the fibre. Neither of you speaks much. The work does not require it. The waterfront noise softens as the day wears on. Porters finish unloading the morning's ships, warehouse doors sliding shut on cargo that will sit until tomorrow's wagons carry it inland. A few boats still drift in from later mornings, their catch is thinner than yours, and you exchange only a nod with the men bringing them ashore. There is no need to compare. Every fisherman knows what kind of morning the still water gave. Before heading home, you stop at the market to trade a portion of today's earnings for what the house needs. A little oil, some vegetables from a farmer's stall near the edge of the square, a twist of salt for tomorrow's bread, should there be enough left over to justify it. The exchanges are brief. familiar faces on both sides, coin and goods changing hands with little more than a word or two. The walk home is unhurried. Your legs carry the dull ache of a full day's rowing, and your hands smell of fish and salt in a way that will not fully wash away until tomorrow's water rinses it out again. The lane is quieter now, evening settling over the rooftops, smoke rising here and there from cooking fires being lit behind closed doors. Inside, the evening meal is simple, some of today's catch, cleaned and cooked over the small fire, alongside bread and whatever vegetables made it home from the market. Your son asks, as he does most evenings, whether tomorrow's catch will be bigger. You tell him what you tell him most evenings, that the sea decides that, not you. He accepts this the way children accept most things their fathers say, without needing it explained further. Afterward you sit for a while near the doorway, watching the last light fade over the rooftops toward the harbour. Your shoulders ache in the familiar way. The net you left drying by the boat should hold well enough for tomorrow, the mended patch tested and proven, the new repair finished before it could become a real problem. Nothing about today was remarkable. It rarely is. But the basket's sold, the debts of the season are a little further paid, and the boat waits ready for another morning exactly like this one. Sleep comes early, as it always does. Tomorrow begins again before the sky has any colour in it, the same as today did, the same as it has for as long as you can remember, and likely will for as long as your hands can still hold an oar. Thank you for joining me for another journey into the past. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show so you never miss another ordinary life. Until next time, remember, every road, loaf of bread, fishing net, workshop, and home was built by hands, history rarely recorded. This has been History of Ordinary People. Live the lives history forgot.